it's Marilyn from Twister Sisters again today. I wanted to show you how to make a twister quilt with a large twister tool. So remember from the first video where I showed you all 6 sizes of the twister tools possibilities and mentioned that each of them, the instructions show how to make a project. So I thought it'd be fun to show you how to make the large project, which is what's shown on the table here, the big pinwheel quilt. So it's made with 10-inch squares, so you can use a 10-inch square pack. And this is basically what we're going to be following to do. So how you do it, and what I want to do is to demonstrate today so that I'm not dealing with a massive grid, is just using 5-inch square grid as my starting example. But I laid them out exactly how this finished quilt is done. So you'll see that this fabric here is this, the next one, and so on. So basically what you do is you take your squares. In this case, since it's my example, I used 5-inch squares, but for the large quilt, it tells you to use 10-inch squares. The example was using 36, 6 by 6. If you have a layer cake, they often come with 42, so you could do a 6 by 7 layout. It's your quilt, do whatever you want. The only kind of hint you do, and it mentions in there, is you want to vary the dark and light shades of the fabric. If you've got multicolor, that's good too, but that just kind of helps the pinwheels pop more than if you had the same color next to each other. It would just kind of disappear. So you do your grid of squares, then you do add a border. In this case, it was the cream, because that ends up being part of the pinwheel when I show you how the magic is done, right? And then after that, it shows you how you apply the twister tool on the diagonal to get the magical pinwheels. So let's show you that next. So now let's talk about the cutting process once that we have our nice framed grid of squares, okay? Before actually cutting, I just want to show a little bit about the technique I use since I've done many of these twister quilts now. You often see people kind of, cutting all around their bodies on different things, but for safety purposes, I like doing like on a corner of a table is best, or an island, or whatever you can do. I know sometimes you can't, but I'm not gonna actually cut here, but to show like my first 2 cuts would be like this, because that's comfortable for me. I should also say I'm a lefty, so this might seem opposite for you. And then I actually turn my body while I'm holding this and do the last 2 cuts. Because important thing I didn't mention with all the tools, it has these fabulous bumpers on them. So it's not gonna move at all. You barely need a finger or 2. So you can be really safe that way, doing the cutting that way. And then your next cut would be following the lines on the seam intersections again. And I would do my same 2 cuts, turn my body, 2 more cuts, and go along the row. So let's look at what those cut pieces look like now. So now let's show you the actual cutting that's done. So I did put in a fresh blade. I always recommend a fresh blade. It just makes it so much easier when you're cutting around the perimeter of the tool. Otherwise you might have to snip it a little bit with scissors. So what we're gonna do now here is I basically am showing you what I did pre-cut off camera so that I can show you some of the finished pieces. So I had done my cuts like I talked about a second ago, but I moved my body, not the way I'm showing here. And then I made that cut, then this was my second cut, all around, my third, and so on. You would do it along the entire row. So all those cuts, so that's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cuts, even though it's a 6 by 6 grid, because the border ends up making another unit, okay? And this is what a unit is. So that's exactly what we did, is what it shows here, and we cut the pieces. And I just basically cut 3 of them to show you that what ends up happening is you pick them up and you rotate them slightly to the right, and they just fit next to each other. See how fun that is? So that again is this diagram here, if I had done the whole row. It's very important to keep them in numerical order, row by row. You might decide to cut 1 row and then sew 1 row. I like to cut more, but it's very important to number them, whether you're using a sticky note or whatnot. So this is where the magic happens, because now you see the second row. You pick them up, look at that fun completed pinwheel. And now we'll see a completed light one. Isn't that fun? So magic happened from the rest of the grid of squares to the big pinwheel one. We use a little twister just because it was easier for me to have that size grid to show you the big quilt. We talked about helpful being on the corner of the table, and then I just kind of adjust, pull it over when I'm doing the grid. Then after you're all done sewing all the individual rows together, then you can add a border to it. I do like to add at least a thin border because these are on bias, so just be real gentle when you're touching them and don't press them a whole lot. And then just enjoy your project.